Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarov's chess channel and welcome to my Basics in Chess series. So in this series we're following opening principles, middle game strategies and the end game strategies. Today we'll talk about some middle game strategies again. Today we'll talk about a very important topic in chess, and it's the so-called positional sacrifice. The positional sacrifice is a sacrifice in which you give up maybe a rook for a bishop and then get a huge activity with your bishop. Your opponent has troubles to activate his rook, although your opponent would be sort of up the exchange, but he has problems to activate his good piece. So the problem about positional sacrifices is when you don't activate the piece. So in order to make this positional sacrifice work, you have to get something out of it. So we need really a new element in the positional sacrifice. So the funny thing about this video that I'll show you today, I already recorded it but accidentally deleted it from my YouTube chess channel, so I'm recording it again, but I'll do that in the near future also again, because I think I've recorded good subjects in chess, but the quality of that videos wasn't good, so I'm of course trying to improve also on my YouTube chess channel, so I'll record many of my videos again, because they weren't so many times viewed, I think, by you, but still I wanted to show you them again, because I have now also more subscribers, more viewers, and basically when I started this YouTube chess channel, I wanted to do this kind of things, strategies, tactics, opening preparations. So I think now with more viewers we could really make this series work. So today, as I said, we are talking about the mathematics of positional sacrifices. So when we give up maybe a rook for a bishop and a pawn, this probably isn't a good sacrifice, because you gave up 5 points and you only got 4 points. But in order to make this positional sacrifice work, you need another element. So this another element is not a pawn, it's not a knight, it's not extra material that you get. It's really another great element in chess, which could be maybe a piece activity. So as I said, maybe you could give up a rook for a bishop and a pawn, but this bishop that you got has now a huge activity, and your opponent has troubles to activate the piece. Sometimes we could give up a bishop and a pawn, a rook for a bishop and a pawn, and create new weaknesses in your opponent's position. So we can maybe split pawns, we could maybe create weak squares in your opponent's position. We could even get maybe our pawns on the 6th rank. We could create maybe central pawn storms with this rook sacrifice. We could maybe create a rook sacrifice, and then your opponent's king could be in danger. So we really need this other element. Without this other element, this positional sacrifice won't work, because your opponent will simplify the position. He'll have this rook, you'll have the bishop on the board. Okay, you have maybe an extra pawn, but then he gets out of the attack and you lose the game. So as I said, we need this other element. So I'm going to show you now some examples of these positional sacrifices. Now we have our first example. It's a game played by Octavio Troianescu against Tigran Petrosian. Tigran Petrosian here with 2 black pieces, and in the game white tried the move knight to e3 in order to attack this rook on c4. So now Tigran Petrosian played the move rook takes e4. He gave up the rook for the bishop and the pawn, but we have now this new element. As I said, we have now another element in the game, and it's now the endangered king, because we have now this endangered king position. White doesn't have anymore the light square bishop, and the queen and the bishop are building this very powerful battery. So if you could just imagine now a new position in which maybe white would have some pawns in front of the king, if he could protect the light squares, then this positional sacrifice wouldn't be correct, because we wouldn't have this other element, or in this case this endangered king situation. So that's why you see Tigran Petrosian activates his bishop. This rook's, although you're basically up the exchange, but it's not about rooks anymore. I think in this game it's about really this open diagonal, and that's why this other element was so important in the game. Here white tried knight to c2 in order to defend somehow. Here we have d5. Petrosian cements his great piece. Now basically this bishop cannot be kicked away by any piece. In order to make maybe something happen, you would give up back the exchange. You would have to give up your rook for the bishop. Here knight to d4 was played, and now b4. So Petrosian attacks the queen side further, wants to open the position here for the bishops. We have c takes b, a takes b, and now a4, queen to a7 with some discovered attack possibilities on the king, queen to f2, and now rook to c8. We have b3, bishop to f8. Petrosian is trying to remaneuver the bishop, of course, create new attacking possibilities on dark squares, because you should place your bishops diagonally. Here we are threatening, of course, to place our bishop here, and combined with this bishop, the king would be really vulnerable to this attack. So we have knight to b5, queen to a6, queen to e2. I'm not going to explain now all of these moves from this tactical point of view. I just wanted to show you how this rook sacrifice for a bishop and a pawn was great in order to activate the bishop. So here queen to b6, again a check, king to f1, and now rook to c3. Again, a positional sacrifice. We're giving up again a rook for a knight, but we get, again, I'm pointing out this new element. We have now a new element. It's this passed pawn. So now we have a new element after knight takes c3, b takes c3. You see, white is here simply on the defensive side. These rooks are not great. This pawn will march on, supported with this bishop. So here in the game, rook to c1, we have queen to b3, simply taking another pawn. We have rook to c1, and now bishop to b4. So this pawn is protected. Again, this is now our another element, as I mentioned. We have now again the great bishop's activity, a pass pawn, and all of these rooks here are basically used only as defensive pieces. So g4, we have a bishop takes c2, rook takes c2, queen takes a4, f5. Here white wants to counterplay, wants at least maybe to split the pawn structure in front of the king and maybe create some perpetuals if the position allows it, of course, getting maybe a draw here. In the game, e takes f5, e takes f5, g5, passing through, keeping the position in front of the king compact, h4. We have bishop to c5, the check, it's not a check, pardon me. After h takes g5, we have queen to f4, now comes the check, and after king to e1, we have queen to g3. King to d1, we have queen to g1, attacking, queen to e1, trades of queens, and now after h takes g5, we have a new position in which black can stay with his pawn on the board, which is very important. You see, Petrosian gave up his rook here for the knight, but has this pass pawn. You cannot take, of course, because you get bishop to b4, the pin, and now it's time maybe to take this pawn, and we would have a winning endgame in which we had maybe a bishop against bishop and 3 pawns against the rook, which is of course in our common evaluations. If we have, for instance, a bishop and 3 pawns against the rook, it's worth 6 points against our opponent's 5 points. So this should be probably again a winning game. So let's see now what happened in the game. King to e2. Here white tries to get out of the dark squares because, as I said, bishop to b4 was really a serious threat. Here in the game, bishop to d4, protecting the pawn. We have rook to a2, and now simply Petrosian plays with the king, bishop to e5, and now after king to f6, we have a new position in which king takes f5 was played, and now after king to e3, here everything is perfectly protected. We have now 3 pawns on the board, the bishop, and it's game over here for white. So, okay, this was now first example. Let's see now another one. Here is a game played by Garry Kasparov against Alexei Shirov, 2 great tacticians. In the game, Shirov tried here knight to c5, and he wants to, of course, protect his bishop on b7. All of these games that I'm using in the video will be in the description below, so you can maybe analyze the whole games. I'm just wanted to show you these examples of this positional sacrifices, about this mathematics of positional sacrifices. We have now knight to c5, and here Garry Kasparov plays a great idea. King takes rook takes bishop here on b7, knight takes, and if we evaluate now this position, again we have a new element. As I said, we need new elements. In this particular case, the other element is a bad bishop position. So the only piece that basically was good on the board, the only minor piece, was this bishop on b7, because it attacked, of course, here the pawn on e4. That's why here Garry Kasparov gets rid of the last piece that has some kind of an activity, and after knight to b7 we have a new position in which the knight is out of game, the bishop is out of game, and here after the move b4, here Garry Kasparov really locks these two minor pieces, has still a flexibility to improve, of course, the position of his bishop. He has the opportunity to play bishop to c4, knight to a3. So Garry Kasparov's pieces will find a way into the game. On the other hand, black's pieces are out of game. So we have now this other element. As I said, this other element is the lack of activity by black's pieces, which isn't so easy to handle here for black. How to activate it, where to place our pieces in the game. Bishop to g5. Here Shirov tries desperately to find some kind of an activity, but now knight to a3 with preparations to play knight to c4, then attacking here maybe the d6 weakness. So here castling played knight to c4, a5, we have bishop to d3. You see Garry Kasparov piece keeps the position compact with his pieces. They're all protecting each other. The bishop is, of course, a very nice centralized piece, protecting the knight on c4, a takes b, c takes b4, and queen to b8. Now h4, attacking the bishop to h6, and now knight to b6, played by Garry Kasparov. You see, his pieces are dancing all over the board, although he's down the exchange, but this positional sacrifice was good because he had this other element. So rook to a2, we have castling, rook to d2, another problem, queen to f3. We have queen to a7, and now after knight to d2, it's basically a lost position for Alexei Shirov. The problem is that you cannot cover here this this e8. This is the problem, because you get something like bishop to b5, also knight to f6, forks on the king and the rook are possible. So that's why here Alexei Shirov decided to give up back the exchange. If you try to move the rook somewhere else, then you get something like knight to e7, and we can take here this f7 pawn. So it's again a lost position for black. In the game, knight to d8 was played, and now after knight to f8, king to f8. And if we evaluate now this position, now the material is equal, but we have created a new great element in the chess game, and it's the pass pawn, which is supported. The good thing about this pawn is that it can be placed, of course, on b5, and then after it also on b6. Again, black's pieces are simply too passive. This bishop is aiming into nothing. The knight is out of game. We can also include this rook into the game, maybe rook to c1, rook to c8, and other ideas. So in after this couple of moves, Garry Kasparov won the game very, very easily. So let's see now another example. Here we have a great game. It was deep blue against Garry Kasparov. Again, a Garry Kasparov game. He's really one of my favorite chess players. Here we have a position in which white has a very nice activity with the pieces. The main idea could be maybe to occupy here the weakness on d5. So here Garry Kasparov has a weak square on d5. In order to solve really these positional problems, Garry Kasparov played again this rook sacrifice. Rook takes c3, after b takes c3. Let's so far calculate what we got. So we have now given up a rook for a bishop. So far we got only 3 points for the rook. Our opponent got 5 points, but now we get another element. We have, first of all, we can take the pawn. Bishop takes e4. After bishop to c1, we can take king takes bishop takes g2, king takes g2. And if we evaluate the position now, okay, we got a pawn and the bishop for the rook. So far we have 4 points, but we have, again, I'm pointing out this other element. This other element is now, in Garry Kasparov's case, this pawn-centric control. So you see black has 2 centralized pawns. Our main goal is here to advance the pawn on d5 and then get really a nice restriction, because then this 2 pawns would really restrict these four important squares on the board. So that's why I think this positional sacrifice is perfectly fine. So we got 3 points for the bishop, we got 1 point for the pawn, and a pawn central control. So at least I think black has an equal game, although down the exchange. But here Garry Kasparov recognized this possibility to get out of some other positional problems, and he managed to get a draw. He didn't win the game, but against Deep Blue to get a draw. This was played in 2003. This Deep Blue was also evolving, so that's why I think it was great accomplishment here by the legendary Garry. So let's see now another example. Here's a very instructive game. It's a Viktor Alexandrovich Lublinsky against Mikhail Botvinnik. Mikhail Botvinnik with the black pieces has some troubles here, we have to admit it, because Mikhail Botvinnik has here 4 pawns that are weak. So these are the main targets of whites. Black needs to do something in order to get out of this mess, although black has, of course, the power of the bishop pair, but these bishops are not so good. This bishop is blocked out here by the c4 pawn. This bishop is blocked out by the e5 pawn. And the knight is a more flexible piece. Of course, the knight will always find the good squares on the board. Of course, with some maneuvers, the knight will find a way into the game. But here, Mikhail Botvinnik, really a great player, played on a positional sacrifice, rook to d4. He wants to improve his pawn structure. He needs to do it because he doesn't have anything left. He has to improve somehow. And after knight to e2, here bishop to c8. Here after knight takes e4, knight takes d4, pardon me, we have c takes d4. And we have now a new position. After bishop to f2, we have c5, in which, okay, we got only so far the bishop for the rook the knight for rook, but we have now a new strategical element, and it's the so-called supported pass pawn. The supported pass pawn is really a powerful element in chess. It's really hard now for white to face this pawn structure. The bishop is blocked out, so basically we have created a new position in which white doesn't have anymore the bishop. The bishop is out of game. Our bishops could now play. We could maybe find another way to include somehow the bishop. This bishop suddenly has a good activity. I just wanted to point you out in this particular position. This bishop was out of game. Now basically the light square bishop of blacks here now is the best minor piece on the board. So after knight takes d4, c takes d4, you see how Mikhail Botvinnik improved the position by a simple rook sacrifice. So bishop to f2, c4, c5, rook to f1, and now f5. Now black isn't even scared to open the position, because these bishops are aiming here against white's king. So whatever you do, if you try e takes f5, then g takes f5, we would have 4 connected pawns in the center. And as I said, another element can be also a central pawn storm. Here I've pointed that also out. So this other element, this other great element when you play on positional sacrifices, can be really this nice central pawn storm. When you get this pawns rolling in the center, then of course white would have some troubles here. In the game, bishop to g3 was played. White is desperately trying to improve the position of his pieces, and now bishop to d7, we have rook to d1, and now f4, kicking away the bishop. This bishop is really paralyzed now. It's like it's not even on the board, I think. Here, this bishop shouldn't be evaluated at all. It's worth 0 points now. So that's why if we evaluate now this position, we have basically 2 bishops for a rook, which is a great thing. So we have g5 by Botvinnik, g4 after f takes g3, bishop takes g3, and now bishop to h3, attacking the rook. The rook to f2 was played, and now you see Mikhail Botvinnik is just pushing forward, trying again to kick away this bishop on g3. We have rook to d2, and now h4, bishop to f2. Now this rook comes very actively into the game. We have a new target, and it's of course the weak f3 pawn. So in the game, rook to d3, rook to f4. You see how Botvinnik cements his rook. Basically, these rooks are not good. These rooks are out of game. As I said, we cannot evaluate now these rooks by our common evaluations. These rooks are by white are not worth 5 points. I'm not sure how many points should we get them, but here these rooks are basically out of game. This rook is active. Basically what we want to do maybe is just improve the position of maybe this bishop on c7. So this bishop needs improvement. The queen as a flexible piece can always of course find a way into the attack. So king to h1, we have king to h7, rook to g1, and now bishop to d8. You see how Botvinnik is trying to improve the position of the bishop, because now at least this bishop is protecting our g5, and maybe we could sneak in somehow with the queen into the game. So queen to e2, we have queen to f7, we have queen to d1, and now queen to h5. Again, another great move, because now we could also try maybe to push the pawn on g4. Bishop to e3, queen to f3. Here queen takes f3, and now after bishop takes g5, we have rook takes d3, bishop takes d8, but not a problem. Here after rook to e3, we have a completely winning endgame. You cannot protect this pawn. Then again, we are having this 2 extra pawns in the center, so it's game over here for white. So great game by Botvinnik to come up with this idea to play rook to d4. Basically he was lost here. This, as I said, these bishops are out of game. The pawn structure is really bad, so that's why rook to d4, perfect move. So let's see now our last example. It's a game played by Samuel Reshevsky against Petrosian. Again Petrosian with the black pieces. The problem here of blacks, of course, the problem of Petrosian here is that white has here this very nice 2 centralized pawns. So if white manages to do something like d5 to get these pawns connected on the 5th rank, then it's game over here for black. So in order to escape from this very nice attack, Tigran Petrosian, one of the best defenders, finds really a great move. He plays the move rook to e6. He gives up the rook for the exchange. After a4, we have a knight to e7. After bishop to e6, we have f takes e6. What Tigran Petrosian has gained here is now a new position in which we can play on our blockade. So our pardon me, I moved this one. So our other element here in this position is now a potential blockade on light squares. So now basically if we evaluate this bishop's activity, this bishop is out of game. So that's why this idea to play the move rook to e6 was a great one by Petrosian. In the game queen to f1 was played. We have knight to d5 attacking the rook, rook to f3, and now bishop to d3. You see how now the pieces are rolling, the pieces are active. In this position rook to d3 was played by white. After c takes d3, queen to d3, and now b4. Now at least Petrosian managed to improve the position. This game ended in a draw, but if we go back here after the move here, this move rook to e6 here played by Petrosian, if you don't play it, white has really a simple plan to play something like bishop to f3, then maybe d5. So that's why this idea by Petrosian was really a great one in order to escape from white's attack, and as I said, he finally get a draw. So okay, I hope you realize these ideas. Let's go to our text here. So as I said, you should evaluate your pieces by their activity, not by common evaluation. So if you get an active piece, it's probably even better. A good bishop is always better than a bad rook. So that's why you should sometimes calculate, do I have really another element? Do I have maybe a piece activity? Do I have maybe an endangered king position by my opponent? Can I maybe create a central pawn storm, or these other great tactical elements that can happen to you in a middle game? And then really it's time to strike, to play on this positional sacrifice and maybe surprise your opponent in the middle game stage. So okay, I hope that you realize these ideas, and I hope that you enjoy these videos. Meanwhile, you can watch my other basics in chess videos from the series. Here is the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all times if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.